Good evening and welcome to another edition of Crossroads. I'm your hostess is Lucienne Diné, and I have a very, very well-informed guest here tonight. They're always well-informed, but this is an especially well-informed guest, and this is Professor Dick Mayer, retired professor. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Dick.
Thank you, Lucienne.
And Dick has been working very hard to help people understand what's a pretty complicated process here, and that's how we plan our future. And Dick, tell me your background. Why did you get interested in planning? You're an economist, right?
Right. Well, I got some economics training and geography training. I taught economics and geography at the college. But even one of my earlier incarnations, I was a Peace Corps volunteer working in community development in Nepal back when Kennedy was president, way back. And got me interested in what happens in a community, in an area, and got me into planning. When I came to Maui, I was teaching at the college and got appointed at a very early age, at 29, actually, to the Planning Commission.
That's a young planning commissioner.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anyone that young on the Planning Commission in a while.
I'm not sure there have been. And I was on the Planning Commission way back when the first beginnings in South Maui were taking place, when Wailea was going through and certain other developments were taking place at that time. And was very much interested. And subsequently, over the years, I've been involved in other planning efforts. Upcountry, I was the vice chair of the Community Advisory Committee, Citizen Advisory Committee, for the Upcountry Plan. And most recently, I was the vice chair for the GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, to put together the Maui Island Plan. And although I'm still the vice chair of it, tonight, as I give the presentation, we talk about things, I'm really not representing that body, but I will be describing some of the activities that did take place in that planning process.
So, to just recap, you've served on the County Planning Commission way back in the day. Then you served on a regional planning body that planned the community plan for Kula, and that was maybe, what, 15 years ago?
About that, right, yeah. 17 years ago.
And then, what, about 5 years ago, you volunteered to serve on the General Plan Update Committee.
That's correct.
Okay, so just put it all in perspective for folks. Dick has been very busy for 30 years.
40 years.
40 years. And tonight you've brought us something that's pretty remarkable. I saw this, the reason I invited Dick on my show is I saw this presentation at the Kihei Community Association, and I apologize to those of you who were at their meeting tonight that I can't be there because they have great meetings, but hopefully some of the folks there tonight can catch this show when it plays next week at the same time. But when I saw this presentation, I said, wow, at last someone sort of has all the maps in one place and you can sort of see all the different things that are proposed rather than just hear about one or hear about another and not have the big picture. So was that your impetus, is like to put together the big picture?
I wish we could do this for every segment of the island. Tonight we're going to be taking a look just at South Maui, where a lot of things have been proposed, and that community really has to wrestle with what they want over the next 20 years and into the long term, really, and they're going to be setting the foundation. It'd be great to do the same thing for Central Maui, West Maui, Upcountry, etc. But right now we're going to take a look at South Maui.
We'll start where we can. So the reason that this is important is because this new Maui Island plan, it's a plan for the island of Maui, is going to be voted on this year by our council, right? And so developments will be in or out just depending on what they decide.
Exactly. The county council during the summer now will be going through some of the policies, and then in the fall, August, September, October, they'll start getting into the actual maps and diagramming out where urban growth boundaries will be and rural growth boundaries will be. In other words, where development will take place. And that's really setting up the framework for what will happen after that, which are the community plans. Maui Island has 6 districts, and each of them, one by one, will be going through its community plan, and they're really going to be based on this Maui Island plan. So it's a very important framework for that discussion.
So this is the big enchilada, and then those are the little burritos on the side. Each one is their own.
They're very big burritos because the area like South Maui and Central Maui and West Maui in particular, those 3 have so many things happening in those areas. Traffic, schools, roads, housing, how much housing, all those issues will have to be answered, and where they'll be within their regions.
So before we get into the slides, because once we do the slides, I think we just want to talk about the slides. In a nutshell, if I were living in South Maui, what would be your message to me about what's being proposed for its future?
I would try to work with the South Maui, the Kihei Community Association. John Miller is the president, and they have meetings once a month, but during the next month or two, I think they should be meeting more often to try to be able to give to the county council their version of what they want for their community, what kind of framework they want. This is not the detail. They're not going to map out where every plot of land is going to be. But
every roundabout's going to be.
We're not, that kind of stuff is not going to be in this. But what they should be able to say is, do we want development above the highway?
Yes.
Do we want...
and how much?
Exactly. How much? How many new residences do we want in our community? Should we have more hotel, less hotel? The big questions, the big issues are something they should be talking about with the council over the next several months and be able to, when the council has its hearings, be able to make a good presentation.
Now, I know some communities are talking about actually sort of sending a plan to the council saying this is what we would prefer in our community in terms of areas that they would want developed or not developed, and just the kind of ways that they would like to see their communities you know, progress into the next 20 years. Do you think South Maui has any interest in doing that? Have you met with any of the folks on this community association?
Yes, I have.
You're just right up the hill, you know.
Yeah. No, I have gone down to South Maui and I've talked to them. I gave a presentation to the community. I know that they're interested. It's a complicated process because on the one hand you have the big landowners who have paid consultants, who have drawn up maps, who have all this organized things, and they'll be going to the council saying we want our property developed this way or that way. On the other hand, the general public doesn't have all the information, so they have to work together to put together a plan, and so that when they hear the proposals that are being made, they say, yeah, that's a great one, or that's a lousy one, and why? So I think
so they have a framework to sort of consider the different proposals.
And each of the communities,
makes sense.
Central Maui should be doing it, Upcountry, West Maui. So when the maps are drawn up for each of these areas, they should be able to make their comments.
So if you're watching from Central Maui, from West Maui, from any place, because all three of those areas have a lot of growth proposed, this is a good model of getting together what's proposed and then trying to look at it side by side and saying, good, not so good, better.
Exactly.
And therefore, you know, the cream should rise to the top. Is that kind of where people should go with this?
Right. And what I've done is I've tried to put together some of the issues, let's say for one of these regions, South Maui in this case, that we'll take a look at now, and see the issues that are coming up, the proposals that have been made, and I'm hoping the residents of South Maui will seriously look at these and say, hey, that's good, that's not good. I'm going to raise some problems that I see, but it'll be really up to the community, broader community, and eventually the county council to decide what the plan is. Great.
So if our great crew tonight will help us, we can zero in on these slides and let Dick tell us what he's learned. Tell us what he's figured out here.
Okay. Well, this is the question. What's South Maui's future going to be? And we can get this. And there's some questions that need to be considered. What kind of South Maui do you want? And I mean, when I say you, do you, the residents of South Maui, want? What problems need solving? Traffic, obviously, is one. What will maximize quality?
Water is another one.
Water is a very big one. Ocean, and how much pressure should be put on ocean resources. What will maximize the quality of life? What can be done in the plan to improve the way people live there? How much development should be allowed or not allowed? And finally, does the proposed Maui Island plan, and there have been already several proposals made by the General Plan Advisory Committee, by the Planning Commission, and by the Planning Director, do they have it right where the urban growth boundaries are, where the rural growth boundaries are in South Maui?
Can we step back a minute and just, you know, for everyday people, what is an urban growth boundary? What does it mean to you?
An urban growth boundary is an outer line around what potentially could be urbanized areas where you'd expect to see wastewater treatment, you'd see water lines, etc. And the reason why we put these boundaries in, it's the first time this has ever been done on Maui, is because it's very expensive for Maui County government to be spreading all these facilities all over the place.
Send a water line up the hill to Kula, for instance.
Exactly, or wherever it would go. To have infrastructure all spread out, it's expensive. Police, fire, ambulance, all these services. So if you can keep things relatively compact, you probably will be able to do them more efficiently and with higher quality. And so the boundary line is going to be drawn in each of these districts.
So it's kind of a planning tool.
Exactly.
And then the rural growth boundary, that's different.
That is probably not so much in South Maui, although there may be one if the people they want it. The General Plan Advisory Committee recommended a rural growth boundary on the Mauka side. But in Kula, for example, in Haiku and other areas, rural growth boundaries are there to define, again, where certain rural services should be found, less intensive than urban, and defined in the plan itself.
But different than just having ag lots or big plantation,
Exactly, where you might have
fields.
some more rural subdivisions, where you have a mixture of farms and residences, those kinds of things.
Okay.
So
what happens next?
Well, let's take a look, just a couple of fact things about South Maui. One is that
we need our slide. Thank you.
The South Maui, the population has grown considerably. In fact, now with a population of almost 27,000 here, we can see, and the housing units, it's really interesting in South Maui. The census counted 18,000 housing units in South Maui, but only 10,800 or so are occupied. A lot of them are vacant, and those, of course, are all the transient accommodations in various condos that are there. And in addition, there are hotel units as well. So this gives you a rough count of what's there now. And when we think of it, what you might want to look at is this number of occupied units, 10,800, and see what the various proposals are to increase that over the next 20 years.
Now, Dick, to be truthful, the vacant units aren't vacant all the time.
No, by no means.
A lot of them are rented some of the time.
They're rented and very often occupied, and there's certainly people driving cars and putting an impact on the beaches and parking lots, et cetera.
Using water. And the population of almost 27,000 people, is that full-time residents, or does that include the people that only come
only
for the
residents.
winter? Or?
It's only the residents. Doesn't include any of the tourists, any of the part-time people. It's counted in April of just residents. So in addition to that, we have two other groups. One of the visitors to the island, and the second is the workers who come from central Maui, from upcountry, to work in the hotels that add traffic and their presence in the South Maui community.
Does anyone have any number about what kind of infrastructure South Maui should be planning for based on the number of people that are actually trying to be there at any given time?
Well, if we look at the 7,000 vacant units, and let's say at Christmas time or January, those are probably 80–90% full. And so we're talking then, and 2 people per unit or 3 people per unit in some cases, we're now talking about almost a doubling of the population in those periods of time, also midsummer, and then in addition, all the workers who come down to the area. So the traffic in South Maui is a major issue, and it's way beyond what 26,000 residents would be pushing.
So just say that it's good to kind of get a big handle on this. All right, back to our slides.
This slide I think is interesting. What it shows down here at the bottom part of the slide are the present areas where people live in South Maui, and up on the top part of the slide here in this whole area is the Mauka region, where big ranches big companies own the land.
And the color is who owns it?
The color tells who owns it. The blue areas are Haleakala Ranch. The pink area in the middle is the Hawaiian Homelands that extends all the way up to Kula, and they have plans to develop housing down through that property. The green area on the left is the Kanaolu Ranch, and then you'll also see on the left some more blue, which is again Haleakala Ranch, and finally the yellow on the far left is A&B's land, which is slated for some development. And over on the far right is Ulapalakua Ranch. So what we have is really 5 different entities that own the whole hillside above South Maui: Ulapalakua Ranch, Haleakala Ranch, Hawaiian Homelands, Kanaolu Ranch, and A&B Corporation. They will be all wanting to see some development taking place on their lands to enhance the value of their properties.
So this is very different than how the lower part of Kihei developed.
So the lower part, the coastal part, especially the area below the highway, is now chopped up into thousands of lots, small lots, but the owners of these lands would love to be able to develop these areas and put lots of small lots on their property to increase the value of their property.
So there's one argument that I've heard at meetings. I'm sure you've heard the same thing. Gee, Kihei is just a mess. It's a hodgepodge because there were so many small lots already when people started buying in and developing their condos or their, apartment units. But here we have a fresh slate. We have big chunks of land, big landowners. We have a chance to do it right. Is that true, or is there another view of it?
Let's go on with the slideshow, because I think we'll see the proposals that they're making.
Okay.